if you're looking for clarity, if you're looking for direction, if you're looking for courage or strength to make a change, put yourself into an uncomfortable situation, but one that has meaning to you, one that will move your life forward. And you don't necessarily have to jump a mile in. You don't have to go listen to this podcast and go, right, I'm going to go run 20 miles tomorrow. Amazing. Maybe it's running 500 meters. Maybe it's running a mile. Maybe it's having a difficult conversation with a relationship or a girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, work colleague, or boss. Something that is challenging for you, but conditions you to do the things you know you should do because your life will be better because you're doing it. If you can grasp that and make it an automatic habit or a new normal for you, I can guarantee, and there's not many things I can guarantee, but I can guarantee your quality of life will be higher as a result. The real reason I'm running another marathon, why comfort scares me more than suffering, and what I'm trying to prove, and to who or to whom. I'm Brian Keane, four-time best-selling author, creator of The Circle, the online group mastermind for fitness pros. And normally I would be deconstructing expert guests on all things health, fitness, and mindset in this podcast. But based on feedback, 2026 is going to have a lot more solo episodes from me. Topics like this, Q&As and questions that have been sent in. So listening to feedback from you, the listener. So thank you so much for following on socials and telling me what episodes and format it is you like. And I'm also testing on a new camera. So this is why if you are watching on YouTube, Brian Keane Fitness, you'll see that there's a massive increase in quality because I am planning to do considerably more solo-based content for 2026. And as you probably gathered from the introduction and from the title, I'm going to be talking about the real reason I'm running another marathon and that little bit of a clickbait of why comfort scares me more than suffering. And I'm going to unpack it in today's podcast, things around the comfort trap, what suffering actually does, the proving thing and the honest bit around that, and what I'm trying to either prove to myself or having gone deeper on this, whether it's proving to others, and how you can potentially ask similar questions and apply it to your own life. And you don't necessarily have to run a marathon or a half marathon for this. This could be in your relationship. This could be in your job. This could be in your fitness journey, and making sure that your ladder is up against the right wall. And something that has came up quite a lot in my space recently is people asking about the reason I'm running another marathon. Because if you follow my channels or you've read my second book, Rewire Your Mindset, you see that I'm very vocal about my dislike for running. I like having ran, but I hate running. I'm not built for it. 85 kilos. I'm built like a little muscular hobbit. I'm not built to run that type of distance. So it's distance, makes up words for a solo podcast, distance. And what I find is it challenges me a lot, more so than CrossFit workouts, strength and conditioning sessions, bodybuilding workouts, things that I naturally gravitate towards because I'm quite good at and also equally enjoy. And what I'm hoping that you'll get from today's podcast in terms of the promise from me is that you start questioning maybe a narrative or a story that might be holding you back when it comes to your comfort trap. And I spoke in Rewire Your Mindset, that second book, about the curse of it's okay syndrome. And normally, in a lot of cases with weight loss, with body composition, with relationships, with the job, yeah, it's okay is one of the worst curses that you can get. Because if you are really in a position where you dislike and hate where you are, there's normally enough pain to change. And on the flip side, if you're really happy with where you are, your relationship, your job, etc., there's no need to change. You want to continually evolve, but there's no necessarily need to make a big life change in the moment. Where you can get really stuck is the yeah, it's okay syndrome. And what I found is there's been a huge parallel for me recently back to 2018 when I did the Marathon des Sables, which was the 6 back-to-back marathons through the Sahara Desert. Part of the reason I signed up for that race and completed it in 2018 was life had got very comfortable around that time. Financially, I was doing well, business was doing well, my mental health was in a good place around that time. And I just felt a little bit unchallenged and a little bit demotivated. And one of my ways historically to get out of that has been to set myself a big goal, something that challenges me either physically, mentally, emotionally, or a combination of all three. And that's when the parallel in 2018 happened. I met Tom Otten, who's been on this podcast a couple of times, an ultra runner, and he told me about this crazy race in the Sahara with a venom pump within arm's reach and running 6 back-to-back marathons, and I just thought it was absolutely insane. And when life started to get comfortable, several months after that, I was like, okay, I need to get myself out of this. I'm falling into a comfort trap. I'm going away from the message and the words that I'm sharing with other people about stepping outside of your comfort zone. That old adage or cliche or quote from Vincent van Gogh that your comfort zone's a great thing, but nothing ever grows there, was really coming into my forefront in 2018. And in the last 6 months or so, I've been getting that same whisper of, okay, you need to go do something that's a little bit more challenging now. And although a marathon and a single marathon in Marrakesh is on the outside looking in, comparatively not at the same level, marathon training for me has always been incredibly difficult. The poundage on the joints, the sequencing the week so that you can get your long runs in and not let it come at the cost of relationships or family time has always been a little bit of a challenge. So I wanted to put myself into that position. And then the plan as of recording is to do the Cairo half marathon 2 weeks later. So I will document that on my channels about how to recover and prep between a marathon going straight into a half marathon. It also doubles over with the plan to travel more around 2026. I spoke in 2024. I did a very popular reel on Instagram off the back of a challenging year, what I called my butterfly year in 2023. Really bad breakup, not really sure what direction I was going in. And I call it my butterfly year, or my caterpillar year, where, just when the caterpillar thought it was about, the world was about to end, to turn into a butterfly. A very, very challenging year. And in early 2024, I said, fuck it, I'm going traveling more. I'm going doing more things that are fun this year. And that has carried in to 2026, where I'm in a very good position now, a very healthy relationship with a really amazing person. My daughter is thriving and doing great. My business is very fun and exciting at the moment, especially with a pivot more towards the business mentorship, the coaching of other fitness pros, physios, health and wellness businesses. That's very jumping out of bed every morning for me. Although the fitness aspect will always be a core part of my content, a core part of my message, it wasn't lighting me up the exact same way as working with people on businesses. So I'm eating my own cooking here and following my path of curiosity, something that I recommend people do. I spoke about this in the last book, Rewriting Your Story, about your superpower, following your path of curiosity. What is it that you find interesting that other people find boring? And then merging that with the work question of what do you find easy that other people find difficult. That can bring you into what's called, your Japanese, they call it the ikigai, where you're finding what the world needs with what you're interested in and what people will pay you for. This little Venn diagram of that sweet spot in the middle. And over the last 6 months or so, I've been looking for that challenge and blending it with something fun. And for me, travel is fun. Going to Marrakesh, going to Cairo, Egypt has been on my list for the last decade to visit, see the pyramids, etc., and blending it all together, and then capping off the end of the year, bringing a group of followers to Everest Base Camp. In 2024, I brought a group of my followers to Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, which is the highest standing mountain in the world. And that was, and still is, one of the highlights of my life, not because it was the most challenging and most difficult. I've covered that in a separate solo podcast, but because of the community aspect, bringing up like-minded people who I'll be friends with for the rest of my life. Off the back of that, I said, okay, base camp in Everest in Nepal is the next on the list. So something I've tried to do is anchor both ends of the year with challenging things that are fun, i.e. the Marrakesh Marathon and then the Cairo Half Marathon, and then Everest Base Camp in October, November at the end of this year. The link for that will be in the description below. Places might be gone at the time of recording. There's still spaces for that. And that comfort trap is something I've been trying to avoid. And it's very interesting because I don't want to be a complete disconnection from your potential reality. If you're going through a difficult time, this isn't the time to step into something extremely challenging. In therapy, they call it capacity, where there's a time and a place during seasons of life and times in your life when you can do a lot more, and there's times when you have to scale it back. I spoke on a recent podcast with Thais Gibson about when I sign up for these extreme challenges, particularly Marathon des Sables, running through the Arctic, the 100-mile ultramarathon, the things that were very challenging for me physically, mentally, and emotionally. I had to scale back other areas of life. I had to put work on a minimum effective dose. I had to scale back even family time because of the commitment to this bigger goal. And then you flip it. A misconception around balance, which is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, but as somebody that's ran a business for 13, nearly 14 years, people think balance is like a 7 out of 10 in all areas. So when rewire your mindset, I break everything into four quadrants: health, wealth, love, and fulfillment. Your health is your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health. Your wealth is your bank account. Your love is your relationships, the people that are around you. And then your fulfillment is your job, your career, your physical challenges, etc. And what people sometimes think balance is about being a 7 out of 10 in all of those. That's not how life works. What happens is it's like juggling balls in the air. Sometimes one is up in the air and the other by nature is out of your hand. And in the case of something like a physical challenge, you might have to scale family time back. It still will be doing the minimum effective dose, but you're not going to be as present. Maybe you're not going on holidays with your kids. Maybe you're prioritizing this other goal, but then you flip that when you've hit the challenge. So something I've always historically done when I've done these extreme challenges, I would always do a family holiday out the back end, because it balances out in terms of the micro imbalance from macro balance in your life. And sometimes giving yourself the permission to see it that way can be a real game changer, especially if you are similar to me, where you can be your own harshest critic, where you can be your own biggest enemy, and you're constantly either comparing yourself to a past version of yourself, which isn't always a really good thing to do, or you're comparing yourself to others, or seeing highlight reels on social media or highlight reels of other people's lives and wondering, why am I doing that? When in reality, everyone's running their own race, everyone's got their own struggles, and you have to ask the question, what's my capacity right now for something physical? What's my financial capacity? What's my energy capacity? What's my time capacity for this thing I want to do? Because in some seasons of life, you're going to be like, yeah, hell yes, I'm going to go do a marathon, or I'm going to sign up for a race, or I'm going to go do base camp with Brian in Nepal in October. Or you'll think, actually, I've just came off the back of a breakup or a divorce or a job loss, or I'm in the process of switching careers, or I'm finishing out a postgraduate or master's in college and I don't have the capacity right now for something extreme. That's okay. And not beating yourself up because you're not doing everything at a 10 out of 10 is okay, and giving yourself that permission. But if you are in a good position where you've got a large amount of capacity, you want to be mindful that you don't fall into that comfort trap. And for me, that's exactly where I am, that parallel with 2018. So a question to ask yourself is, okay, what's my capacity look like now? And then what's something that, to quote Rewire Your Mindset, I would regret on my 97-year-old deathbed if I didn't do. And if you don't do it now, or at least put the ladder against the right wall to do it now, how can you move in that direction? Because what happens is the curse of someday. I'll do that someday. I'll do a marathon someday. That was me. I remember back in probably 2013, no, before then, 2011, when I was working full time as a primary school teacher in London. A business and fitness was always a passion of mine. And I had two self-limiting stories that were very predominant for me at the time. One was setting up a business, running a marathon, doing a bodybuilding show. That's something other people do. So that's how my ego protected itself when it came to the narratives and stories I was telling myself. Once I shifted that slightly and I understood that it wasn't cognitive dissonance. It wasn't Aesop's fables of sour grapes, the famous story with the fox trying to get the grapes in the tree and jumping and trying to get the grapes and he can't get them and he goes, oh, fuck it, it's probably sour. Paraphrasing slightly. But that cognitive dissonance and convincing yourself you don't want the thing that you actually do is actually a really dangerous position to be in. And so I would ask yourself the question, what's the thing you want to do? And is there capacity in your life right now to start moving towards that? You don't have to lose the £100 tomorrow. You don't have to start the business tomorrow. You don't have to earn 6, 7 figures in the next week. But are you getting your ladder against the right wall with where you want to go? That's the important part, because that's what ultimately gets you out of that comfort zone. And to quote Rewire Your Mindset, I'm going to be quoting that a lot because this is a very mindset heavy episode. Tell me what you do every day and I'll tell you where you'll be in a year. That comes down to this. Are you progressively doing something that moves your life forward in a meaningful way every day? If you are, you're going to, in the end of 2026, going into 2027, at the end of the year, be so much further ahead than you are right now. But you do need to take that first step. It's an old cliche, but it's so true. The next thing I've been thinking about quite a lot is suffering. And I've had Chris Williamson on the podcast. I'm a big fan of Chris. He does tremendous work. He's the host of the Modern Wisdom podcast. And Chris has a great line that not all suffering is valuable. And that sounds really obvious, but like most good quotes, there's layers underneath it. And as a fitness person, and you might identify as a fitness person similar to me, we assume that difficulty equals valuable. And in some cases, that's true. But in some cases, it's not true. And when you're suffering for something that means a lot to you, we call that passion. When you're suffering for suffering's sake, that's masochistic. And what you're looking to find is the suffering that brings meaning to you. In previous podcasts, a lot of the solo episodes from 2016, 2017, when I was coming through, but hadn't fully fixed or addressed my underlying issues with mental health and anxiety in particular, what I didn't know then that I know now was anxiety for me, as someone that has a type A personality, a very go, 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 high achieving style personality, which can be very serving in some ways, but not in others. And someone that is, I would say, has a talent for forward projection, vision, and seeing the future and where I want to go has never been a weak point of mine. But that same process is a catch-22. It's an evolutionary trait of forward projection. So human beings have this unique ability to see into the future. Your third eye, to quote Eastern modalities, or your reticular activation system, which is the cognitive neuroscience, to quote Western philosophy or Western psychology, your brain's internal GPS, and then being able to see where it is you want to go, and then it blocks everything else out. That's a really useful tool if you wire it correctly. And something I've never struggled with is seeing exactly where I want to go in life. But because of that, if it's not managed, controlled for me through meditation, through journaling, etc., it goes awry. And my anxiety can ramp up to 11 very, very quickly. And if I don't have my baseline life in order, I can be very prone to anxiety attacks, panic attacks, and things that where I just get so overwhelmed. If I'm not sleeping well, if I'm not eating well, if I'm not moving regularly, or if I'm drinking too much alcohol or doing something that's not keeping my body in a prime state, I can go into overwhelm very, very quickly, which is probably something you didn't necessarily know if you've been a long term listener of this podcast. But there's a lot of science around why this happens. And I just happen to be in that demographic of individuals who this can happen to. Robert Sapolsky's got a fantastic book, Dr. Robert Sapolsky, on why zebras don't get ulcers. It's a book on cortisol and stress, but it goes into this overwhelm in terms of what's happening at a physiological level. And it's kind of like a cup spilling over, that if you're not sleeping, if you're not eating well, if you have a stressful job, stressful life, stressful relationship, it's very easy for that cup to spill over in a negative way. And then you go into overwhelm, and then everything starts to shut down. Your body goes into a fight, flight, freeze, and a whole host of other physiological responses that don't serve you on a day-to-day moving through this world, generally in the energy level and the energy level that you want to show up in. But if you're able to keep that cup lower in terms of the metaphorical water that's in it, i.e. sleeping well, eating, etc., you have a lot more capacity to take on stressful events. You have a lot more capacity to set up a business. You have a lot more capacity to do a half marathon or a marathon or do a race. So you have to pull the levers in your life sometimes to increase that capacity through lifestyle change, which has been a heavy content pillar of this podcast for the past, nearly a decade now. 2016, I started the podcast. So we're coming into nearly a decade of recordings for the podcast. And with anxiety and that suffering, what I didn't know a decade ago was I'm very prone to this. So I need to reverse engineer how I want my life to be, and I need to manage anxiety triggers that are around it. And the first real awakening for me was not overdoing it. I have a tendency to do too much work, too much training, too much insert thing here. I have probably addictive tendencies, if not an addictive personality, which lends me to doing lots of different things. And what I always found the most difficult, still to this day, of my 38 years on this planet, is resting and recovering and knowing that I have to take a step back to figuratively take two steps forward. That goes for my training, that goes for relationships, that goes for job, that goes for rest days, everything. You have to, or for me, I have to take a little bit of a step back, or the overwhelm can creep up on me. The anxiety can creep up on me again. And it's very similar in the metaphor I've used. It's like sweeping the floor. You can sweep the floor in your house and it'll be clean today, but if you don't sweep it tomorrow, it'll get dirty again. Your mental health is very similar to that. It's not something that you do once and then it's fixed. You don't do ayahuasca and then it's fixed. You don't do mushrooms and then it's fixed. You don't go to therapy and then it's fixed. It's something you have to manage and stay on top of daily. And when I understood that that suffering was choosing me, I had to flip the script on it and understand that I get to choose my suffering as well. And when I do physical challenges, things like marathons, big goals, finishing books, not writing books, finishing books. Writing books is easy, finishing books is fucking hard because of the process of editing over and over and over and over again. Shout out to my next book coming out in the next few months, actually, which will be Scaling Your Stories, a book for fitness entrepreneurs and scaling their impact and income. Shameless plug. But that is something that makes me feel fulfilled, but it also is suffering that I'm choosing. And it has meaning to me. It has passion for me. And as a result, my anxiety works a little bit like a seesaw. The more fulfilled I feel, the anxiety and the mental health issues on the other side tend to reduce. When I was working full time as a primary school teacher and I hated my job, and then I got to the point where I didn't mind it, which was probably worse because I could have stayed in it for longer. My fulfillment was very, very low and my anxiety was very, very high because I was living out of alignment with what I felt called to do. And if that's something you have to check in with, this podcast in and of itself is going to be worth it, and ask, okay, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? Who do I want to be? And who do I want to be with? That what, who, where, when. Who do you want to be around? What do you want to do with your life? Where do you want to do it? When do you want to have that accomplished? It's a very underrated question, journalism 101, but it can be really useful for a life audit, especially if it's something you're doing quarterly. Something I speak about in the new business book, Scaling Your Stories, the quarterly audit, which is what I do in my business, where I'll run through everything that I'm doing and go, right, do I need to automate, eliminate, or delegate this? Do I need to outsource this? Do I need to get rid of this completely? But you can do a life audit as well. Your groups of people you're spending time with. Who do I need to spend more time with? Who nourishes me? And then the flip side, who depletes me? Who challenges me, but not in a good way? Who challenges me, but does it in a very constructive way where I'm actually leveling up because of being around this person? And you're doing a audit on the people you're spending time with. You're doing an audit on your days, what time you're getting up, your routine, your food, your mental health, and what things make it worse and what things make it better. And as long as you're bringing awareness to it, you give yourself a facilitation chance to change it. But if you go through blind, or what I call in Rewire Your Mindset, ostrich head in the sand syndrome, you'll end up blocking all of that out. And you don't want to go through life that way. So something I had to flip was the suffering aspect. And running for me is suffering. It strips away so much of the bullshit because it's so difficult. And as I said, I would go to the gym 5, 6, 10 times a week if you let me, if I didn't have to recover, and I'd lift weights and I'd enjoy that. But I have to psych myself up for every single long run because I don't enjoy it. I do enter a slight flow state and can sometimes get runner's high, but it's not guaranteed by any stretch. But I always know I'll feel better having done it. And that's the anchor point. So I would say, if you're looking for clarity, if you're looking for direction, if you're looking for courage or strength to make a change, put yourself into an uncomfortable situation, but one that has meaning to you, one that will move your life forward. And you don't necessarily have to jump a mile in. You don't have to go listen to this podcast and go, right, I'm going to go run 20 miles tomorrow. Amazing. Maybe it's running 500 meters. Maybe it's running a mile. Maybe it's having a difficult conversation with a relationship or a girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, work colleague, or boss. Something that is challenging for you, but conditions you to do the things you know you should do because your life will be better because you're doing it. If you can grasp that and make it an automatic habit or a new normal for you, I can guarantee, and there's not many things I can guarantee, but I can guarantee your quality of life will be higher as a result. The next thing I want to unpack is the proving element. And this is where I kind of go a little bit vulnerable and raw, because something that I didn't realize was a problem, and I use inverted commas problem, is I tend to default back to my less mentally resilient self if I don't stay on top of it. And the language I've always used historically for me was keep the sword sharp. If you keep the sword sharp, you don't have to sharpen it. But what can happen is, if you're not challenging yourself, your confidence and backing yourself more, which is chapter 2 in rewriting your story, the last book, it can start to wane and you can start to question it again. And something that happened to me in Kilimanjaro, and I didn't share this on the podcast, this is new and probably the first time I shared it publicly. It had been so long since I had done something very difficult. And the 100-mile ultramarathon in Nevada in 2020, and then I had an attempt at a ultramarathon in Kyrgyzstan where I picked up a parasite and got very, very sick and didn't even make it to the start line for a 230-kilometer run across the Tian Shan from Kyrgyzstan to China. I've documented that in the podcast too. Horrible experience. Came off the back of a breakup as well, so it was just compounded. My dad was sick at the time and thankfully is fully recovered from cancer. And there was just all these things, and life felt really fucking hard during that time in 2023. And Kilimanjaro, although something I cognitively knew I'd be able to do, I had a little bit of fear about the group that I was bringing up before I met them. As soon as I met them, I was like, these are all going to make the summit. But beforehand, I wasn't sure because you don't know what people's mental capacity is like. And something I got a lot of confidence from was reminding myself, not even a new implanted memory, a reminder of, oh yes, you can be really mentally tough and resilient when the case calls for it or when the scenario calls for it. And I honestly needed that little bit of a reminder in Kilimanjaro. It's more now, more than a year later, reflecting on it, where it bumped back my confidence up again. And I spoke about how it's like confidence is like legs on a table. The more legs you have on a table, the stronger it is. Confidence is very similar to that. But sometimes you need to do something big, put a big fucking leg to that table. And Kilimanjaro did that for me, especially being able to bring the whole group up. And it wasn't just about me, it was about everybody else, the community, the people that were there and getting to the top. And this marathon in Marrakesh is a little bit like that in terms of just a top-up reminder. It's not one of these things that's going to transform my life. I'm not going to come back and go, what, right, I can go to the moon now. I've just done a marathon. I've done several before. But what it does is it keeps the sword sharp for the start of the year ahead of doing Everest Base Camp towards the back end of the year. So that uncomfortable truth of trying to get the internal validation for myself, not external validation. I think I'm past that point. Maybe I'm not. You're probably listening to this going, no, you're fucking not. But I don't think I chase that external validation anymore. The pats on the back mean, and they feel good, but the same way as someone's like, oh, you're a twat, I hate you, Brian, that doesn't really land either, because it's kind of like, and I've spoken about this metaphor, one of my early business mentors, Elliot Hulse, had a very famous video where he was speaking. This was going back 15 years ago. I was still teaching when he did this video, where he speaks about the birds singing in the sky, and that one person comes out in the morning and goes, oh, that bird just made my morning. I heard it singing, it woke me up, and it was the best thing ever. And the bird's like, all right, cool, I'm just going to keep singing, I'm a bird. And then another person comes out and goes, that fucking bird woke me up. I had a really rough night last night. I didn't sleep. And now I hear this bird fucking singing in the morning. Oh, I'm so angry. And the bird's like, cool, I'm just going to keep singing, I'm a bird. And it kind of worked as an anchor for life on just doing your thing, that the praise shouldn't raise you up too much, because if it does, it means that the criticism and the knock is probably going to hit you in equal proportion. And if you're able to kind of keep that seesaw balance, to use a metaphor from earlier, it normally leads you to doing the same thing that feels right for you, whether people are giving you congratulations or telling you you're the biggest twat in the world for doing it. And that's been really useful for me. So with the external validation, that has been work for the last decade that I've had to do a lot of journaling on, plant medicines, therapy, conversations with friends, where you're trying to unravel this because you don't want to be living a life on somebody else's term. It's like that Harley Davidson quote that when you're writing the story of your own life, don't let somebody else hold the pen. And when it came to that, the internal validation still is something I have to check in with regularly, which I didn't know until more recently, that I actually need to keep my sword sharp for me, not because people are looking in on me, not because people are inspired by what I do, not because people have judgments for what I do, but because I need it for me. And anchoring into my why on what kind of person I want to be, what kind of father I want to be, what kind of individual, what kind of man do I want to be, they're really important anchor points for me. And I think even asking that question, and I've spoken before about the importance of your why in the fitness mindset, particularly with the fitness journey. What's your why? Why are you doing this? Why do you want to lose weight? Why do you want to change your body composition? It needs to be stronger and bigger than, you know, I want to just look better. Like generally, like for most people, it needs to be, fuck, I'm sick of feeling this way. I don't like not having confidence in myself. I don't like that I'm not being the inspiration for my children. I don't like that I walk by a mirror and cringe when I see the reflection. It's something fucking deeper that goes into why you're doing it. In the new book, Scaling Your Story, I'm actually taking this SCALE acronym, and this goes, I think, is probably relevant, not necessarily just to business, but the SCALE acronym and the framework that I use with my mentees and my business clients is the SCALE is storytelling, C is core offer, A is amplify it, L is leverage, and E is evolve. And in the storytelling, the last questions that I give at the bottom of that chapter is, why are you doing it? Why are you setting up a business? Why are you in business? Why are you doing what you're doing and who you're doing it for? And whether it's just wanting to make the world a better place because you were here, to I want a better life for my family, to I want to travel and do all the things that are on my bucket list, you need to know what that why is. And whether it's a marathon you sign up for, whether it's a business that you want to start, getting to the root of why you do what you do and who you're proving it to. And whether it's external, somebody outside that you're trying to prove wrong, which can be quite a hot burning coal. I've spoken about this in the past, that hate is a very powerful fuel. The fuck you, I'll show you mentality, which can be really helpful, but it's like fire. Fire can heat up your house and it can burn it down. You need to be mindful. Do you want to switch at some point to gratitude, to peace, to fulfillment? Because it's similar to your car going off petrol or diesel or electric. It's still fuel for your why, it's fuel for your motivation, but one of them is very, very hot burning. Your hate is like your petrol. Your gratitude is like your hybrid car or your electric car. It's a lot smoother and can go a lot longer. So again, it's not saying that you shouldn't use different tools at different times. Maybe it's very useful for you to get you from 0 to 1, especially things like hate, which is an internal driver for a lot of change with people. Hating your predicament, hating where you're at, hating somebody else, having this negative fuel that's driving you. And it worked for me. I won't put my hand up and say it didn't. When I was setting up my own business, and I've told this story in Writing Your Story, my last book, that one of my aunties at a wedding, when I left my job as a teacher to set up a personal training business, was drunk and just ripped into me about how stupid I was, that I was an idiot for leaving a safe and secure job. And I used that for the next 18 months. Every 4 o'clock morning, I had to get up every 5 a.m. I was like, I'll fucking show you. And what was interesting, if you've read that book, is that that was one of the first people who, when the fitness mindset hit the bestseller list, was like, I knew you'd be a success. And the point of that chapter wasn't to rip on a family member. It was to show that people will change their opinion when new evidence is given. And that was a useful tool for me during that period of life, the same as the anxiety that I refused to let go of for so long because I was afraid I wouldn't get stuff done. I had to let go of that story and understand it was like a hot burning fuel that would eventually run out. And I had to switch my fuel source to service, to gratitude, to something that's at a higher frequency. And again, that's not to preach that you should do the same, but it is a potential framework to filter why you do what you do and if it's still serving you in this moment. So why this marathon specifically? A Good Nudge agency who actually organized this reached out, and so I'm getting this, full disclosure, I'm getting the marathons paid for me, my flights, accommodation, all that good stuff. And all they wanted from me was to say that I'm doing it and to document it while I'm over there. I've done way more because they've been a pleasure to deal with and amazing to deal with. And also the package is really good in terms of the affordability, the layout, etc. So the link is in the description below if you want to check that out for future marathons. I won't be in all of them, but I highly recommend the company in terms of the way that they run things and produce things and do it. But for me, that was the initial feeling to move towards it. When they reached out, I was like, okay, Marrakesh, that's sun, it's January, a top of a vitamin D would be nice. And then Cairo 2 weeks later has been on my bucket list for about a decade. So it became a very obvious race and choice for me. And then the timing which ties in more to the fitness side of things, is I try and sequence and periodize, a word that I hate saying. You get the spelling, periodize, where you do the segments of training at different stages. I tend to do a lot more running over the winter because, one, my step count is lower. Now, that being said, I bought a walking treadmill in 2025, literally the best thing I bought last year. So that has kind of put this into null and void. But historically, winter, my step counts are a lot lower. And I like having a goal to train for in the winter months because I get, I won't say bad, but definitely a downgrade of happiness because of your seasonal affective disorder, the lack of vitamin D, the really long nights in Ireland in particular, and having a focus goal just shifts me out of that. And historically, I've always performed best for marathons and longer runs when the race is in January or February versus the summer when there's loads of other things going on. There's events, there's festivals, there's different races. If I'm playing soccer, if I'm playing football, there's too many things going on in the summer. So I don't tend to do as well with the training plans and programs during this period because there's other things in my life that are higher priority. I'm going on holiday, I'm doing things with family, I'm doing things with friends. So the winter months tend to work really well for me. So in terms of timeline, that's why it fell quite well for me. But I also back off heavily. I've done previous Q&A podcasts that I don't run all year round. I don't do long distance running all year round. I'm not a runner. I'm not an ultra runner. I'm not a marathon runner. I'm not one of these people that will regularly run during the entire year, whether it's 50-mile weeks, 100-mile weeks, 20-mile weeks, and escaping back and forth or scaling back and forth. I tend to run in blocks. So I started training in the running phase of this was for the High Rocks in Rome, which I've done a separate recap episode on. I had a bit of a hamstring issue going into that anyway, so my mileage wasn't that high. But then October, November, December, I started to ramp my mileage up in my weekly newsletter, which has been something I've been experimenting with for the last couple of months, which the feedback has been amazing, is Brian's 5, which is just a 2-minute read of 5 things I'm learning about or seeing and implementing that week. Came straight off the back. I stole this from Tim Ferriss and his 5-Bullet Friday. I was like, that's a really good idea. I'm just going to take a concept of this and just put my own lens on it. And if you've been following that, and you can subscribe to that newsletter, it comes into your inbox every Thursday at lunchtime, 2-minute read. It documents what I was doing in the training. So increasing from 10K runs at the end of workouts, my speed sessions, deloading, ramping up the mileage, the longest week. I was documenting that normally in point 1 or 2 of Brian's 5, how I was training that week, so that you could pick up tips and tricks for what I do and what to consider if you're doing your own training program, i.e. not working with a coach, or if you are, questions that you could potentially ask your coach to implement it into your plan. And what you'll see in February, March, April is it won't be running based. It'll be strength and conditioning. It will be speed work if I'm planning to play sport. It will be building up the base for, pardon the pun, double over the word, for base camp in Nepal. It'll be doing a lot more lower body based sessions. And then come August, September, it'll be all geared towards Everest Base Camp, very similar to what I'm doing with the programming for those that are coming. So with Earth's Edge, in terms of how it's set up with the company, they organize all the logistics and I'm bringing the group together. So it'll be a group of my followers, which means it'll be like-minded people, but I'm also covering the training aspect. So there are training days that are all hike based, but I'll also be helping people with the training program. So they're loading, their eccentric training, they're building up the muscular endurance in their lower body, the stuff around the altitude, all that good stuff. And that's how it'll switch for me. And what I find with training in particular, more so than nutrition, because that doesn't really change year to year, apart from a few tweaks here and there. With training, it gives me longevity. I put up a reel last month in December on my Whoop age, which is 8.2 years younger than my chronological age. So I'm 38 chronologically, biologically I'm 29 in terms of the Whoop tracker. And again, we can argue all day whether that's accurate or not, but it fits the narrative and the story I'm trying to tell here. So confirmation bias is a very strong thing and it works in your favor sometimes. But I do feel 10 years younger, 100%. I definitely don't feel 38. My body feels considerably younger. I'm arguably the fittest I've ever been. My body composition is arguably the best it's ever been. And that's down to consistency with nutrition and lifestyle, sleeping, etc. But also my training changes throughout the year so I don't get bored. And an interesting thing, and I'm doing considerably less fitness coaching with people in 2026 to focus on the circle, to focus on the business mentorship, etc. But something that has historically worked over the last 13 years of training people is making sure they don't get bored and switching up training programs after 6 weeks, 8 weeks, etc. Not because of muscle confusion or not because of, it's optimization training. It's really so people don't get bored, because you can progressive overload for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, just gradually increasing the weights, doing the same workouts. And as long as you keep your nutrition and lifestyle metrics in order, you're going to get change, particularly body composition change, losing body fat, building muscle, etc., or getting fitter or stronger. But people get bored, and when they get bored, they fall off track. And that same thing happens to me with training. If I don't switch it up regularly, I get bored. And you'll see towards the back end of February, I will stop running completely, because, or if I'm running, it'll be sprint based because I'm training for something else. And that gives me longevity. It keeps training fun. It means I don't get bored with it. And as a result, when I go into something like a marathon phase like this, I can ramp it up quite slowly. I can keep my maintenance at a decent level. I do a lot of quality training versus quantity junk miles in my marathon based prep, which some of you will be familiar with from previous episodes talking about this. I do a lot of high quality 10K runs. I do a lot of speed work, things that, one, work for my body type as an 85 kilo athlete, 5'8". I'm built like a small little muscular hobbit, as I mentioned earlier. I'm not designed for that really skinny, low impact running. I'm quite a heavier athlete. And as a result of that, I can't do multiple 20-mile days over and over and over again like some runners can. If I do, my knees, my ankles, my hips, just everything gets too sore, and then I don't even make it to the start line. And something that I've spoken about on guest podcasts when I've had runners on is getting to the finish line isn't the difficult part. Getting to the start line is the difficult part, especially if you're older, because you'll have injuries. You might have trained too much. You might have done too much, and you didn't even get to the start line. That's the really difficult thing. And Everest Base Camp would be similar. Once we hit the, middle of the year, we hit May, June, July, when it's coming into crunch time in the lead up to base camp, it's making sure people don't get injured, they don't overdo it, they don't stress themselves out, they don't mind fuck themselves for this challenge, knowing that they've got a community, they've got me, they've got people that are going to help anchor them through it. And that's what you need to be mindful of. And in the case of Marrakesh, it doubles over as just a cool place to go. Same with Cairo, documented it on socials. So that was probably, that was the reason for this particular choice. So the bigger pattern to wrap this podcast on: Everest Base Camp towards the back of the year, marathons and half marathons at the start of the year. You don't have to follow my path identically, but what I do think is relevant advice and probably useful advice is choosing things that are difficult at anchor points of the year if you have the capacity to do so right now. I'm moving into a different season of life, more so with the business side of things. The circle members that I have, the online mastermind group, which is very much the high priority for 2026. I have a lot of coaches in there, personal trainers in there, family people in there who have kids, who have husbands, who have wives, where balancing is a big part of this. And something I've always tried to do on my channels, love me or hate me for it, is I've always tried to practice what I preach. And I'm not always right with that. I've done podcasts that I recorded 5, 6 years ago that I've completely changed my mind on in terms of the opinion and how I approach things. You listen to episodes from 2016 or 2017, and I'm shouting down the microphone to go out and get the fuck after it and get what you need to get done. It doesn't matter how you feel. And there is a time and a place for that mindset in writing your story. The last book I talked about that tough love versus compassionate mindset, but they're like tools in your arsenal. When I'm on a 20-mile run or a 20-mile marathon and I've got 6.2 miles to go, I'm not going to be compassionate with myself and be like, oh, Brian, take it easy. You've done 20 miles. Good job. Just sit down now and leave it. That's when I'm shouting at myself to keep fucking going. You're not there yet. You said you were going to finish it, finish it. But then there's other times where, I didn't hit a business task for the day, or I was a bit switched off with my other half or my daughter or my friends because my mind was elsewhere. Like, there's no point beating myself up for that. Bring awareness to it and go, fuck, okay, try and be better next time. Just try and be a little bit better and more present the next time you're in their company because you didn't really show up as you wanted to today. And it's tools in your arsenal, and something that you'll gather hopefully from listening to this podcast throughout the rest of the year, even with more solo episodes, it's just adding tools to your arsenal. What serves me in this moment? What's the tool I need in this moment? If you're trying to hang a picture, you can do it with a sledgehammer, but you'd be better off with a small hammer to nail it into the wall. You're looking for the right tool for the right job at the right time. And something that will be a priority focus for the podcast, and the same with the circle members, is like balancing these things out. When should you be compassionate with yourself? When do you need to push on? When do you need the wooden spoon, for the lack of a better phrase? When do you need the tough love and come on, get up, get it done, finish the workout, finish the lead magnet generation, finish the difficult conversation with your spouse or your loved one that you need to have. Just get the difficult things done. When I had Jamie Alderson on the podcast around this time last year, we spoke about this, that life is more difficult for people who take the easy option, and life is easier for people who take the difficult option. But with the caveat, not all difficulty and all suffering has meaning. You need to choose the right type of suffering. But one thing I can nearly guarantee, similar to what I mentioned earlier, is if you keep choosing the easy path, life will feel difficult. And if you get used to and condition yourself to choose the hard path when you know it's the right thing to do, your life will be considerably easier. So that's a wrap on today's podcast. Again, not too many points. I've written a couple of bullet points that I've talked around, but the real reason I'm running another marathon, why comfort scares me more than suffering, and what I'm trying to prove and to whom. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Let me know. Hit me up on Instagram, Brian_Keane_fitness on Instagram. Pop me a DM or pop it up on your stories, even better, and just put in a couple of words on how you found today's podcast. And let me know if the solo episode is something you're enjoying, because it is the plan, based on feedback, to do considerably more of these throughout the rest of 2026. I will still intersperse it with some guests as normal. I plan to do a couple of very long form interviews with a few friends, just to mix up the design of the podcast so that it doesn't become stale and it's something that can continually grow, being now one of the top 0.5% podcasts globally. So thank you for listening, because you were the reason that it's that highly ranked. And I just want to try and give back in any way that I can. With my circle members, I regularly put in, look, what are we doing that you would love that we're not doing right now? And try and add in the hot seats, add in the workshops, add in the quarterly meetups. I want to do the same with the podcast here. So let me know what you're struggling with, what format, what kind of questions you'd like answered, what kind of topics you'd like covered. All of that will help greatly for 2026 and beyond. And I will be interspersing it with the next month or two with guests, because they're previously recorded episodes. And then we'll be doing a little bit of a pivot to more solo style sessions like this. So keep me posted. The link to everything I've talked about in the description below, for books, the circle, mentorship, all that good stuff. Thank you so much for listening. Have an amazing, amazing day. I'll catch you next week.